The year is 1973, the era of Watergate, the Cold War, and growing public interest in unidentified flying objects, fueled by decades of reports and speculation. In this atmosphere of secrecy and curiosity, two well-known figures from the Los Angeles entertainment industry, Robert Emenegger and Alan Sandler, received an invitation that went far beyond their usual production activities. Successful businessmen with experience working on serious projects, they were summoned for a meeting not at a Hollywood studio, but on the tightly secured grounds of Norton Air Force Base in California. The purpose of the visit, they were told, was to discuss the possibility of producing a documentary film based on real, forward-looking research projects overseen by the United States Air Force. Arriving at the base, passing through checkpoints, and sensing the atmosphere of military discipline and secrecy, Emenegger and Sandler were escorted to a conference room. Awaiting them were not actors or screenwriters, but high-ranking officers. Key figures at the meeting included Paul Shartle, who held significant positions at the time, head of the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, a FOSI, and head of intelligence, possibly at the base or regional command level, along with other representatives from base command and research divisions. The atmosphere was businesslike, yet carried an undercurrent of intrigue. It became clear to the producers that this wasn't going to be a standard educational film discussion. The discussion began. The military officials presented a range of potential topics for the documentary: the latest developments in aviation, future concepts of warfare, advanced communication, and surveillance technologies. Emenegger and Sandler listened intently, evaluating the cinematic potential of each proposal. And then, almost casually, Paul Shartle brought up another project, one that immediately captured all their attention. This project concerned the UFO phenomenon. The Air Force, as Shartle explained, possessed certain materials on this subject, and the leadership was considering the possibility of lifting the veil of secrecy somewhat, presenting the public with a sanctioned version of events. For Emenegger and Sandler, this sounded like a bombshell. The UFO topic was hot, widely discussed, but the official military stance had always been evasive. The opportunity to create a film with Air Force support, based on their data, seemed like an incredible stroke of luck and guaranteed immense audience interest. The UFO material wasn't just interesting, it was explosive. The decision was made quickly. This topic would form the basis of the future film. And here, the meeting took a completely unexpected turn. Shartle and his colleagues informed the producers about the existence not just of reports or testimonies, but of actual documentary film footage capturing something extraordinary. This footage, they claimed, was shot at another airbase, Holloman Air Force Base, located in the New Mexico desert, in 1971. Years later, in October 1988, speaking on a national television broadcast, Paul Shartle publicly confirmed that he had seen this film. He described its contents with astonishing detail. According to him, the film, shot on standard 16mm camera, likely without sound, captured the following: 3 disc-shaped flying objects appear in the frame. They approach the base. One of the objects descends and lands on the Holloman AFB grounds, while the other 2 hover nearby and then fly away. A hatch or door opens on the landed UFO, and 3 beings emerge. Shartle continued describing the aliens themselves. They were approximately human height. Their skin color was strange, grayish. They had clearly defined noses, distinguishing them from some other descriptions. The aliens were dressed in tight-fitting, one-piece jumpsuits. On their heads, they wore some kind of headgear or helmets, which possibly also served communication functions, as no visible communication devices were apparent. In their hands, the aliens held devices described as some sort of translators or communicators. The most startling aspect was that, according to the film, the aliens were met by an official delegation. The Holloman base commander and other Air Force officers went out onto the landing area and made contact with the arrivals. These details were also documented by researcher Linda Moulton Howe in 1989. Emenegger and Sandler, at that 1973 meeting, were not just told about this film, they were firmly convinced that this unique footage would be provided to them for use in their documentary. This represented an unprecedented level of access, promising to turn their project from merely interesting into historic. To back up their words and demonstrate the seriousness of their intentions, Robert Emenegger was even given a tour of Norton AFB, or possibly specially flown to Holloman, although reports more often point to Norton as the demonstration site. He was shown the specific landing pad and a spacious hangar where, he was told, the actual alien craft had stood after landing in 1971. Perhaps it was moved there, or the meeting with the producers took place in a location simulating Holloman's conditions. He was then guided into two specific buildings on the base. Numbers 338 and 1382 are mentioned. In these unremarkable-looking structures, according to the accompanying military personnel, further negotiations between high-ranking Air Force officers and the aliens took place over the subsequent days following the landing. Emenegger was given additional, even more astonishing details supposedly obtained during this contact. The UFO landing occurred early in the morning, around 6 a.m. The aliens themselves, according to updated information, gave the impression of being professional doctors or scientists. Their appearance was even stranger than initially described. The pupils of their eyes were vertical, like cats. Their mouths were thin, resembling simple slits, and they had virtually no chins. Emenegger was emphasized that this Holloman incident was the only known and recorded case in Air Force history where top brass directly and continuously communicated with representatives of an extraterrestrial civilization. Inspired, Emenegger and Sandler began planning the structure of their film. Given the sensitivity of the topic and the possible reluctance of the USAF to fully admit the contact, it was decided to present the plot as something hypothetical, a scenario of what could have happened or might happen in the future. The Holloman footage was intended to be the climax, presented perhaps as a dramatization or reconstruction, but the audience would understand the implication. The military officials agreed to this approach and reaffirmed their promise to provide the film for duplication. However, the producers' euphoria was short-lived. Sometime later, as preparations for filming were underway, Emenegger was informed that the initial agreement was canceled. He would not be given the Holloman footage. The reasons were either not explained or given vaguely. A change in circumstances, a decision from higher command, national security considerations. Emenegger was deeply disappointed and perplexed. He felt he had been used, first tempted with a sensation, then rebuffed. He decided to try and uncover the real reason for the refusal. Using his contacts, he arranged a meeting with an officer he knew at another major airbase, Wright-Patterson AFB in Ohio, known as a Center for UFO Studies in earlier years, Project Blue Book. This officer was Colonel George Weinbrenner. Emenegger hoped that in a more informal setting or through old connections, he could learn why the project involving the unique footage had been suddenly frozen. The meeting took place in Weinbrenner's office at Wright-Patterson. According to Robert's recollections, what happened next resembled a scene from an absurdist Kafka play. As soon as Emenegger brought up the documentary film and the problems obtaining the promised materials, Colonel Weinbrenner's demeanor changed abruptly. He stood up from his desk, walked over to a large wallboard, and began complaining in a deliberately loud, almost theatrical voice about a completely unrelated topic. Damn MiG-25s. Those Soviets. They have a ton of secrets we know nothing about. We need to find out as much as possible about those MiGs. It's a priority. Continuing this strange monologue about the Soviet fighter jet, Weinbrenner slowly moved towards a bookshelf. Without interrupting his loud lamentations about MiGs, he took a book from the shelf and silently handed it to the stunned Emenegger. It was the well-known volume by Dr. J. Allen Hynek, The UFO Experience, published in 1972. On the title page was a dedication from the author to Colonel Weinbrenner himself. Emenegger understood instantly. The colonel's bizarre, demonstrative performance about MiGs, completely unrelated to the topic of their meeting, and the silent handing over of Hynek's book. It was all a coded message. Robert concluded. Their conversation was being monitored. Weinbrenner couldn't speak openly, but with this charade, Emenegger believed, he was indirectly confirming two things. First, the Holloman film was real and its existence was a sensitive subject. And second, the decision to deny access was made at a very high level, and he couldn't discuss it. Hynek's book was a symbolic gesture, pointing to the reality of the UFO phenomenon. Despite the refusal to provide the secret footage, the documentary film UFOs, Past, Present, and Future, produced by Sandler Institutional Films Incorporated, was eventually released in 1974. It gained some notoriety as it was made with